Okay, let's get started. Hello and welcome to the December 1st, 2022 meeting of the Humboldt County Planning Commission. I am Chair Noah Levy, presiding tonight. And before we get started, I just want to bring your attention to the fact that there are several different ways to either participate remotely or follow along remotely. They're listed in detail at the start of our agenda. If you'd like to participate and you're at a computer, the best way to do that is through Zoom. We've got the login information on Zoom at the top of the agenda. The other way you can participate remotely is by telephone, and we've got that information there as well. You can also watch the proceedings on Access Humboldt on cable channel 10, or you can follow a live stream of the meeting on the humboldt.legistar.com link. That's called the Granicus system. You can also follow the meeting there. Just be advised that if you're following on Granicus and you do want to call in by phone to make a comment, the Granicus system is a little bit behind the live feed. So you'll need to make sure you get on the phone earlier than you might need to otherwise, than you might think you need to. And with that said, let's start the meeting with a salute to the flag. Okay, and Tripp, could we have a roll call of who's in attendance, please?
Thomas Mulder.
Present.
Peggy O'Neill.
Here.
Melanie McCaver.
Here.
Mike Newman.
Present.
Brian Mitchell.
Present.
Noah Levy.
Here.
And Alan Bongio.
Here. All right. Got all 7 of us attending tonight. That's great. That brings us to item C, agenda modifications. And I'll just ask the director if we have any modifications to the printed and published agenda.
Thank you, Chair. We do not have any modifications to the agenda. There are 2 supplementals on the dais tonight. The first one is for Salmon Creek Farms, and the second one
That was the second one?
yeah.
We're going to get through these if you want.
is for the Ian Stoyanov conditional use permit. It's a letter from a neighbor.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Director. All right, then that brings us to item D, which is public comments on items not on the agenda. Are there any members of the public either present in person or on Zoom or phone who would like to make a comment on an item that is not on tonight's agenda? Yes, I see a couple of hands up. So the first one is Public 7454. Go ahead and make your comment.
Hello, Noah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, it's very much better tonight. This is fantastic. I had a bunch of people at the last meeting, and they say they tried to comment, couldn't get in, couldn't understand you. So that last meeting was a hot mess. Hopefully this one won't be.
Yeah, I apologize for that.
I did have one of the. Yep, I'm sure you're going to acknowledge that. So, and I did want to thank John Ford because he did take a significant amount of time with the public, myself included, to go over some of the objections to items that won't need to be pulled off of consent. And I think that's a real benefit when you have somebody as a director who's willing to take the time and minimize your time and my time also and other people's time. So I wanted to make that comment. I have a lot of angst with the Measure S tax. and I am in possession of a public records request, which I was blocked on for a long time, but I finally got of 1,010 people who are in arrears on the Measure S tax. And I really want the county to do and work with these people to give them payment plans to enable them to pay that. I also wish the county to go ahead and make sure, and I've given the list to Scott Adair and your planning director, to make sure that people don't benefit from some of the free stuff coming down the pipes unless they paid their tax. This is important to me. A lot of us feel maybe, the supervisors went upside down and backwards to enable these people to not pay their tax for a while and do. The last thing we want to see is forgiveness. That won't be happening. I can guarantee you that will end up in litigation if that's forgiven. But, you have some people out there, some of the richest people in Humboldt County, such as Alex Moore, who has 7 permits out there, and as far as I can tell, unless he's paid them since I did this public record request, owed $178,430.94. Mr. Moore, pay your taxes. You're very rich from what you made off this process. Unless you've been a poor business person, you'd easily be able to pay those. Patrick Murphy owes $217,078.24. We don't even know where Patrick is, if he's even still with us on this planet. Nobody seems to know. There's a Yoel Bielski, and I think he owes over $500,000 in tax. So we have a whole bunch of people. Now, I'm asking, people like Madeline Lap with the Humboldt Growers Association to work with her people, and they're on the list there. And everybody needs to work and pay their taxes. It's the fair thing and right thing to do, and I wish to see these taxes spent to remediate the abandoned grows that are out there, to work with CDF
10 more
and
seconds, Ken.
other organizations to get money. So thank you for the opportunity to tell me how many seconds I have left. And so I'm going to wind up here and just say I'm not naming names today on other people that I might name names on out of respect for them, and I hope to work with them in the future to make this all be done right and fair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Okay, and we have one more comment on the phone that is from Public 7108. You can unmute and speak your comment now.
Good evening. This is Bonnie Blackberry, and I was calling to comment about the last Planning Commission meeting that happened on the 17th. I was trying to listen. I had intended to call in, but the technical difficulties made it impossible to figure out what was being said in portions of the meeting. I was particularly concerned about the new 5 acres plus 67,000 square feet plus of propagation greenhouses on the Cisco grow that got approved. And before the meeting, I had read attachment 6, which had 14 letters from neighbors opposing the project. And so when the commissioners sounded like there was, this broad community support, and Chair Levy said it clearly has a lot of support from the neighbors, as reflected in the letters that we received. I was like, whoa, there was 14, and some of them, most of them had all sorts of details and concerns. And so, yeah, my question is, did anybody read those letters? Oh, thanks.
Well, I'll just take a moment to respond to that, Bonnie, because I did make that comment, and I don't know if I missed something that was made available to others, but I did not see the collection of 14 letters from neighbors opposed. Anybody else remember seeing that?
I didn't either.
Okay. Because frankly, I always think we all pay attention to the letters when we get comments from neighbors. So not sure what happened to that.
If I remember correctly, I think it was about 6 or 7 that we had received, most in favor.
Yeah, right. That's what I recall too. Commissioner Mulder.
So, from my recollection, and I gave the packet back to Tripp, the original letters that were more in leaning towards opposed were in the initial staff report packet that we get. Because this is kind of how I do it old fashioned. That's where I saw those letters, and then we had, I don't know, 6 to 8 on the little link.
The Dropbox link.
The Dropbox, those are public comments that take place after the project's been, the staff
Okay.
report comes out from, that's my recollection, but I could be wrong.
There were public comments submitted to you via the staff report, which come in before a certain date. And then there were public comments that were forwarded to you afterwards.
Okay. Director, did you want to comment on that?
I just wanted to remind us that I'd be happy to talk about this maybe a little bit later in the
Yeah.
meeting, but we just took up the time of the public speaker, and normally
I'm so sorry.
we don't respond to public comments.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I should have held my tongue. Anyway, we do have a couple more callers who would like to do public comment on matters not on tonight's agenda. Public 2530, you're next to speak. Public 2530, can you press *6 to unmute? It looks like you're unmuted.
Yes, I did.
Okay, there, we can hear
Yes,
you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Mark Thurman calling. I just wondered what the status might be on the letter I presented about a month ago, which was a letter of January 26, 2022 regarding CEQA requirements for mitigated negative consequences. If the board has taken any action on that or considered it in any way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a comment right now on that?
I'm going to violate the comment I just made to you. We will
Direct-
bring that formal response back on the 15th.
Okay. The director says we will bring a formal response back to that letter on the 15th. Thank you. And now one more comment I see on the phone. That is public 7429. You should be able to speak now.
Hi, good evening, Commissioners. This is Roby Tenorio. I wasn't going to call in, but then I heard you say that you didn't know about the 14 letters, and I was trying to call during that meeting, but the technical difficulties prevented it. But I was very surprised at the Commission's actions because I had read the 14 letters, and I know there was more in opposition in the next stack that came in after that. So I don't know what the process is for reviewing that or revisiting that, but I do think you should. I don't think it was a very well thought out or well looked at the time. Okay, thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Are there any more members on the phone or on Zoom who would like to make a comment before we close public comment on matters not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will close public comment and move on to the consent agenda, section E. Okay. So I'm going to go through each of the things on the consent agenda and see if there's anybody either present here, any commissioners or anyone on Zoom or phone who would like to pull them for discussion. The first item on the consent agenda is the routine adoption of a resolution authorizing remote teleconference meetings, basically the monthly reauthorization of our ability to have hybrid meetings. Anybody want to discuss that? Seeing none, we will leave that on consent. Item 2 is Allison Shore special permits in the Neeland area. Now, I just want to note that this and several other items are on the consent, but they are being continued to a date uncertain and will be noticed for the December 15th meeting. That's the next meeting. Anybody wish to comment on that one? Okay, number 2 will remain on consent. Number 3 is Merriweather Farms LLC, special permit in the Whitethorn area. This one is also, we are recommending that we continue this to a date uncertain and notice it for the December 15th meeting. Seeing no comments on this, we will leave that on the agenda, on the consent agenda. Item 4 is the Georgy Stoyanov conditional use permit and special permit. This one is also recommending to be continued to a date uncertain and noticed for the next December 15th meeting. Anyone wish to discuss this one?
Why is it being noticed to a date uncertain and then given a specific date?
Yeah.
I apologize. I didn't catch that. It's really, the problem is that the notice had the wrong Zoom link on it, and so we've got to renotice it.
Okay.
And so,
Okay. Well, this is, I did want to get clarity because it's a different formulation. So should I say it's continued to the December 15th meeting?
no, it doesn't matter. We're renoticing it.
Okay.
I mean, it's the fundamental thing is it's being renoticed. The thing it should say is this is being renoticed for the December 15th meeting.
Got it. Okay. Not to a date uncertain. Okay, thank you. Number 5 is the Jesse Carnes conditional use permit in the Maple Creek area. This, again, we are renoticing for the December 15th meeting. Anyone need to comment on that tonight? No. Okay. Item 6 on consent is the Emerald Mountain Organics LLC conditional use permit in the Alder Point area. This one, a little different than the others, this one is being continued to a date uncertain. That's the recommendation tonight. Is there anyone wishing to comment on that one? Okay. Item 7 is Humboldt Craft Farms LLC conditional use permit in the Burr Valley area. That one, we are also continuing or recommending continuation to a date uncertain. Any comments on that? Nope. Okay, and then we have number 8, the Geck Mahler Coastal Development Permit in the Lolita area.
You guys need to have the revised.
There's a revised
agenda.
agenda today. Apologize.
So oh yeah, I was looking at the one I printed. Well, I have the one that's, yeah, okay. It is correct, okay, yeah. Yep. Anyway, then we have item 8, Geck Mahler Coastal Development Permit in the Lolita area. This one is being continued to December 15th, the next meeting. Yeah, okay, no comments on that? All right. Item number 9 is the Ivan Stoyanov conditional use permit in the Miranda area. This one is recommended for approval. Any comments on this one? Any questions on this one? Yes, you'd like to pull this? Okay. All right, we will pull that from the consent calendar. Item 10 is the Lower Thomas Road LLC conditional use permit and special permit in the Garberville area. Is there anyone wishing to comment or ask questions on this one? Okay. We will leave that on consent. And item 11, High Grade 007 LLC, conditional use permit in the Dinsmore area. Anyone wishing to ask comments, questions or comments about this? Seeing none, we will leave that on.
Chair, we need to pull that. And
Oh.
we're going to ask for a continuance, I guess.
Okay.
So please pull it. We'll come back to it.
Okay, we are going to pull item 11, that's High Grade 007 LLC, conditional use permit from the consent, and we'll come back to that one. Number 12 on consent is the Salmon Creek Farms LLC special permit in the Salmon Creek area. That one, I see a commissioner, we would like to pull that, so we will pull that from consent as well. And item 13 is the Judy Davis extension of parcel map subdivision and special permit in the McKinleyville area. Is there anyone wishing to pull this for discussion or questions? Seeing none, we will leave that on consent. And finally, we have the Apartment LLC permit extension in the Miranda area. Is there anyone wishing to pull this item for questions or discussion? Seeing none, we will leave that on consent. Okay. So just to review, because it was a fairly long consent calendar, we're going to need to have a motion to approve items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 13, and 14 from the consent calendar. And that would leave, just to make sure I'm not missing anything, that would leave off number 9, Stoyanov, number 11, High Grade, and number 12, Salmon Creek, for a separate discussion. Is that correct? Okay.
I'll motion to approve the consent calendar except for 9, 12, and 13.
11 and 9, 11, and 9, 11, and 12.
9, 11, and 12.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Tripp, can we get a roll call vote on that motion, please?
Alan Bongio,
Yes.
Noah Levy,
Yes.
Brian Mitchell,
Yes.
Mike Newman,
Yes.
Melanie McCaver,
Yes.
Peggy O'Neill,
Yes.
and Thomas Mulder.
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right. So that brings us to items that were removed from consent. The first of which was the Ivan Stoyanov CUP in the Miranda area. I believe it was Commissioner Newman who had a question about that. Did you want to just ask that question directly?
Yes, I think it should be a simple one. I pulled it because of the letter that was presented by a neighbor, and I'd like staff to just talk about generator noise and what is in the report, what has to happen for that permit to be valid, and what is done about generator noises for that and decibel levels. Because of the letter that was presented to us.
I'm not the planner on the project, but I did see the letter, and I did respond to the person that submitted the letter. And I sent her an email, and let me see if I can pull up, well, I don't really need to pull the email up. I'm ready to go here. Let's see here. Hold on, I've got my work computer open at the same time. So she was concerned about rodents and about generator noise. For the generator noise, the project is conditioned because it is in proximity. I'm not sure how much proximity to NSO habitat, but it's conditioned that the generators be at less than 50 decibels at 100 feet, or the nearest habitat, which would be the nearest tree line. And also, our county code for the 1.0 ordinance maintains that the decibel level at the property line be 60 decibels, and that it shall not be heard from neighboring residents. So the project is conditioned to maintain those thresholds.
So that means that neighbor can make a call in.
For sure.
And
Yep. And on our
keep dates on that.
Yes, sir. And on our yearly inspection, we'll be checking to see that those thresholds are met. And also, when we do get noise complaints, we record that, add the complaint to the record, we send out a letter, we give them 10 days to rectify that. So we're pretty proactive in addressing noise complaints. As far as the rodents, the project is conditioned that anticoagulant rodenticide is strictly prohibited. And I would hope that, and I for sure know that we'll be looking for that on yearly inspections to make sure that's not on site. And 1.0 has language regulating rodenticide also in the ordinance.
Great. Thank you.
And I did send all the conditions relative to wildlife and generator use to that person and did not receive a response, and I sent it first thing this morning.
Okay, well, since we're having discussion of this and there's a hand raised, I'm going to open public comment on this item. We have a caller, public 7454, and I will give them the chance to comment.
This is Ken Sawatsky. I'll just let you folks know I did not pull a single item from consent. I was not any of those participants in this. But I do have a concern, and obviously the neighbor has a concern regarding the rodenticide. And I think there should be a thing, if anybody in this area ever sees, in any of these areas, sees any of our I don't know, this is probably not condor area, but any of the fowl out there that are dead from rodenticides, the message needs to be sent, and they're still using them out there. I can guarantee you they are. And so hopefully this will not be a case where we'll lose some of our prime birds out there to somebody poisoning the rats that they happen to have. There's all kinds of other alternatives. And the other thing is we do have a generator, and my question that you should ask staff is this generator to be transitioned in by 2024, as everybody else seems to be, to some other alternative source of power? And that wasn't brought up during the presentation. Maybe it is true that's what it is. But that should have been in the staff report, showing that they are going to get away from the generator in a time period. 18,000 square foot should be able to be something that is done with solar or wind or some other form of a parcel. And so that's a concern I wish to bring forward, even though I did not pull this from consent. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you. And I am seeing no other comments out there. I'm going to close public comments, but I will give the planner the opportunity to respond to that last question.
Condition number 15 in the staff report states that the applicant shall cease to use generators as a primary power source for cannabis-related activities by December 31st, 2024. The applicant shall either connect to a utility or have an alternative source of power starting January 1st, 2025.
Thanks for confirming that. Any other commissioners have comments or questions about this one? Oh, Commissioner Mulder.
I just want to state that I read the letter, was concerned, read back through the packet, saw conditions B1 and B20 that seemed to take care of those concerns, and I'm good with the project, so I'd make a motion to approve it.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Thomas Mulder,
Yes.
Peggy O'Neill,
Yes.
Melanie McCaver,
Yes.
Mike Niman,
Yes.
Brian Mitchell,
Yes.
Noah Levy,
Yes.
and Alan Bongio.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously, approving that item. And now that brings us to the second item pulled from consent. That was high grade 007. Yes, you had a,
Yeah, I'll motion to continue this project to either a date uncertain or the next meeting, depending on the director's direction.
thanks.
Could we give a date of the 5th of January?
Okay. Motion to move this project to the meeting of January 5th.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to continue the high grade 007 LLC project in the Dinsmore area to the January 5th meeting. Discussion, Commissioner Mulder, or question?
I'm going to ask the director if it's appropriate. Would it be appropriate now to ask a question about a condition of approval or wait till the January date that it comes back?
You can ask it now.
Condition number 16, basically they're calling for 100% water storage, but to forbear the well from June 1st to September 30th. But there is also a hydrologic evaluation attached to this, so it was just confusing for one. And then two, when you look at your water use, they wouldn't need, in my mind, the way I was reading it, they wouldn't technically need that whole 144, looking at their use reports from earlier on in the other months of the year.
The reason we recommended that was because the well produces 1 gallon a minute. And so when it gets into the summer period, when water tends to get a little lower, it's probably not going to produce at that level, which is when most of the water is going to be necessary.
I missed the 1 gallon a minute. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I did see that item. I'm glad you brought that up because it is unusual to require that much storage to be added, but there was a discussion in the staff report about that, so thanks for bringing that up, though. Any other, oh, yes, I'm so sorry. That was just so can I also open this one up, since we've had a little discussion about it? I will open this up for public comment on the high grade 007 LLC. Again, this is the motion and the second. We do have a motion to continue it to the January 5th meeting, but since we've had a little discussion about it, I'm going to allow for public comment on it right now. And we do have a hand raised remotely. So yes, Mr. Sawatsky, you are recognized to speak on this item.
Yes, I noticed that 1 gallon a minute. Anytime you have a 4-hour test with 1 gallon a minute, I mean, that can be anything seeping into the test. And I don't know, I'm glad they acknowledge the fact that it's basically a non-functional water source. Those kind of wells, frequently, if you pump them for 12 hours, end up with nothing. And so I strongly applaud you folks considering this one. And the question by Mr. Mulder was totally appropriate, and I appreciate the fact that this is brought forward. Hopefully before the next meeting, this item can be addressed sufficiently so that you have information that will enable you to make a relevant decision on this particular project. So thank you for the opportunity to speak on this one, which I did not poll.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, so we do have a motion and a second. If there's no other need to discuss. Oh, I'm sorry. I just noticed that one other hand has gone up. So before I close public comment, I will also recognize Brianna Carlson. You may speak on this item.
Hi, good evening. I'm representing the client. We work with NRM, and I feel a little blindsided by the continuance. I didn't see it coming. I also think that there'd be some mistake about the well report, because we have a well report that has a different reported water yield.
Okay. That's interesting. Well, I mean, this one is being continued, but I think it's, I'll put the matter to the staff as to whether they want to speak to the question of whether the well report that the applicant thinks they submitted is different from the one that we have. And
I will say this, we're very happy in the intervening time to take a look at an alternative well report and to see if there's different facts to be considered, and we can change that recommendation. But the recommendation for a continuance is not based upon the well. It is based upon the fact that it's within 600 feet of federal property. And so it needs a special use permit.
got it. Okay, thank you for clarifying that that's the reason for this. Okay, seeing no other comments virtually or no other hands raised, I'm going to close public comment. Before we get to the vote on the continuance, is there any other comments or questions anybody has? No? Okay, then let's take a vote on the motion, please.
Alan Bongio,
Yes.
Thomas Mulder,
Yes.
Noah Levy,
Yes?
Peggy O'Neill,
Yes.
Brian Mitchell,
Yes.
Melanie McCaver,
Yes.
and Mike Newman.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. That item is continued to January 5th. And that brings us to the last item pulled from consent, and that is the Salmon Creek Farms LLC. And I'll bring it to the commissioner. I believe it was Commissioner Newman who wanted to ask a question about that as well.
Yes, thank you, Chair Levy. I was looking at the report here, and there is an alternative, well, they're asking for a permit on a non-storefront retail sales. And one of the items in the report, page 2 of 4, where it says about the non-storefront retail sales, applicant has proposed a delivery model for non-storefront retail sales, deliveries to be made once weekly to reduce vehicle miles traveled and traffic on the access road. And I did not see that in the recommendations of approval or conditions of approval. Did I miss something someplace there?
Hi, I'm Michael Holterman, the planner. So just to clarify, are you asking why there wasn't a condition included that limited deliveries to once a week?
Yes, because this would put delivery, if it's not conditioned there, it could be ramped up at any time without that condition in there. And I believe the road and the other things there weren't conducive to that retail sales going more than once a week as the applicant had agreed to.
No, I got it. So we do have conditions that are standard in all staff reports that the applicant adhere to the approved staff report and cultivation operations plan that was submitted. So if they have in their operations plan, they're going to do retail sales delivery once weekly, that is what they would be limited to, as well as in the staff report.
That would be the operations plan. There's 30 pages in that, is that correct?
I believe so. It's there's an updated version of the delivery in the addendum. There's an addendum included with the cultivation operations plan at the last page.
Can that be brought up then because I didn't see that at all. Well, I'm page 20. It's in the report, but it's the delivery, the operations plan. Page 32 is what you're saying there, Thomas. I'm looking at page 32.
Go 32, and then the next page talks about delivery department dispensaries plan, and then the next page after that, direct consumer delivery plan, and then non-storefront retail event. I think that's what we'll find it.
And I didn't see it in there.
It's on, first, right at the top of page 34, the direct to consumer delivery plan. The Wednesday of every week. If they stop taking orders on Wednesday, they deliver on Friday. Will be limited to local delivery.
Yep, got hands up.
Yeah, you're not projecting at all.
Excuse me for not using my mic. All orders are received received after Wednesday will be processed to the next weekly delivery, but delivery to the public will be limited to a local delivery, and it will be once a week on Friday. I read that in reverse, but it means the same thing.
Okay. Well, we can, since we've had a discussion about this, if there are other questions for the planners, now would be a good time. And then I've got a couple of hands up remotely as well. Oh, Peggy's got
I
her
have a
hand.
question.
Yeah, thanks, Peggy. Go
On
ahead.
page 31, on page 3119, it says that the non-storefront retail within the micro business, it says the non-storefront retail will include sales directly to retailers as well as wholesale sales to distribution companies. It also includes farmers markets, festivals, and other opportunities. So you're not saying that they can only pick and choose one of those. I mean, they get to do one delivery, but they also get to do, these festivals and farmers markets. That doesn't preclude them from doing that, right?
Yeah, I'm going to ask the director to respond to that one, please.
Yeah, Commissioner O'Neill, you're absolutely correct. They can sell to many different people, but it cannot be from their premises. It has to be off-site. So one trip in and out per week, and to whoever or wherever they're going to sell.
So if they want to do their normal deliveries on Friday, then they couldn't go to a festival on Saturday because they already made their one trip a week? Or am I not getting that? I mean, I don't think that they should be limited
Right.
So
to go on weekends and do festivals.
yeah, I think that what I would, the way I would clarify that is that if they were going to a festival or to attend some other kind of event, that's not a delivery trip. That's a trip that they're going on.
Okay, that makes sense. I just wanted to clarify that so that it didn't get out of hand. And then they couldn't go anywhere and, get in trouble or something.
Yeah, thanks. That was an excellent question, Commissioner O'Neill. Thanks for bringing up that point. I am now going to take care of the couple of people in the public who would like to comment on this one. Let's open public comment, and the first commenter is Public 7454. Go ahead, sir.
Again, Ken Sawatsky, you did not pull this from consent, but those were some things I did discuss with John Ford. And the new determination that's, I guess, been made from the dais is possibly different than what I understood it to be with our communication, but maybe I didn't listen well. You have criteria here, and this is, according to your staff report, and maybe that's incorrect, but it's a facility on a road not meeting the Category 4 standard. And so I would hope that maybe the person gets 52 trips out of there per year or something like that based on the weekly thing. Maybe they can cluster but if they're intending to go to another facility according to what you have as far as your criteria, then they should bundle their taking something out up here to go to the other facility or not. And I did want to make mention, I really, really appreciate the questions coming from the commissioners that take the time to read their packets. There's a public perception out there that some people at the dais don't take the time. And, my personal communication with the at-large commissioner, Brian Mitchell, he wrote 1,500 pages of the Nordic things. And for those of you who come in here, and Thomas Mulder and Mike Newman, and those who ask pertinent questions, it's really appreciated that you're taking the time to delve into these packages and ask really relevant questions. I just wanted to make that comment as far as a compliment to those of you who are. If there are those of you who are not, I highly recommend, and there are supervisors that don't even read their consent items, and I have proof of that. So I strongly appreciate all the time you take. And when it came before the supervisors, as far as your compensation, they got a raise. You guys should have got a 10% raise too, as far as your compensation. And I really appreciate all the things you guys do out there for very little money and the dedication that you do on a planning commission. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you. And now we will go to the other public comments. That's Public 7108. Go ahead, madam.
Hi, this is Bonnie again. On the agenda, it says for a cannabis support facility on a road not meeting Category 4 standards. So I'm trying to figure out how that works. And then I guess when they checked off, it's equivalent to Category 4. So is that how you get out of not having it be a Category 4? This is what, 30,000 square feet of cannabis. And one trip for deliveries, how many trips for other importing soil and this and that? Anyway, it's not a Category 4 for this kind of a.
Okay, thank you, Bonnie. Is that the end of your comment? Okay. Well, we do have one more hand raised on Zoom, but yeah, okay. I'm going to go ahead and take the one additional comment, then I think the director is going to respond to what we've heard. The Vanessa Valère of ETA Humboldt, you are recognized to speak, please. Vanessa, I can't hear you yet. Did you, looks like she's on Zoom, so I think it's not *6, it's just hitting the unmute. Okay. Vanessa, for some reason the audio is not coming through. I wonder if you could, if you want, go try, you could hang up and try to connect again, or you could try calling in by phone. Is that the agent for this?
I think so.
Yeah, I'd like to give her the chance to speak on this if we're able. But meanwhile, oh,
can you hear me? Oh,
yes, I can hear you now.
I'm sorry.
Is that Vanessa?
I'm terribly sorry.
Yeah, no, you're coming through now.
Difficulties. Yes, my name is Vanessa, and I'm a representative for Salmon Creek Farms on this project.
Right.
I just wanted to kind of explain a little bit what's going on here, right? Is that basically all of this stuff already exists. The cultivation is already there. The commercial space where all the processing happens is already there. It's all already approved. And they have a transportation license now. So currently, they're able to take their product and sell it to a distribution company that can then sell it to a retailer or that can then take it to a farmer's market. as also a distributor can drive to their property and buy it from them that way as well. What this will allow Salmon Creek Farms to do is jump over the distributor that charges 20 to 60% of your retail cost of the product and put the products on the market themselves. So it's really actually going to lessen the amount of traffic on the road and give them a sustainable operations plan to be able to move forward with what's happening. So I just kind of wanted to make that clear because everybody seems to be concerned that this is something new that's occurring, but it really isn't. It's just changing the operations plan to allow sustainability by removing the distributor out of the equation, if that makes sense to everybody. It'll also allow them, because they have multiple types of licenses on their farms through the state, it will allow them to pull everything into one metric account and keep track of everything a lot easier. So this is really just about streamlining an already existing situation and then giving them the ability to directly sell the product this one day a week. So I hope that kind of clarifies things, and I'm available for any other questions.
Any other questions for the agent while we have her? Nope. Okay. Well, thank you so much for that clarification.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no other hands up online, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the commission. But first, Director Ford, did you have something you wanted to add on this?
I do, and while this is not technically Category 4 road, the two public speakers that spoke to this are correct. You do have in your packet a road evaluation by Almsberg and Preston that evaluates the road, and you will see that they have evaluated it by mileposts, and they did the whole 1.7 miles of their road, and they basically found that due to what will be a reduction in the overall traffic on the road, that the road has the capacity to serve this use. There are some also, there's a map showing the road, and there are also pictures of the road. You can see some of it is paved with the centerline stripe. Some of it does not have a centerline stripe, but is paved. And some of it gets a little bit more narrow.
Okay, thanks. All right. So back to the commission for any further discussion or questions on this one.
And since there's
Okay.
dead silence,
Yes.
I will add something else that I think the applicant's agent said something that's important that 2.0 did intend to do, which was to allow value added to cultivation sites by being able to distribute, by being able to sell in various venues. And so this is consistent with the objective of trying to make the cannabis industry in Humboldt County successful by giving avenues to get the farmers' produce to market.
Great to point that out. Commissioner Mulder.
I read this project and I was like, wow, this is a great one to actually see the microbusiness thing coming to fruition. I could see this as the first I've seen. I know there's probably been a few others of many, because really, as the agent spoke, the value added, the farms actually being able to market themselves and be able to deal with those margins. I mean, as the markets decrease, margins are tighter. So anything that the farmers can do to try to be sustainable and preserve, I'm in support of. And there's a couple of spots on Salmon Creek Road that are rough, but some of them are right there at the very beginning of Salmon Creek,
Right.
as it is. So I could see this, if they're able to market their own product, they're not going to have distributors coming out every day trying to lowball them. So I'm in support of it.
Great. Commissioner Newman, yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't undue traffic put upon this rural road, and that it was thoroughly discussed and put out to the public, so that if there was objections, but it does look like a solid plan to go forward to help our small business farmers here in Humboldt County survive and get ahead. That's so important here. So I'm not trying to curtail that one iota. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't putting undue strain on our roads, our rural roads, and neighbors there in our rural parts of the county. So thank you. If anybody else doesn't have any questions on the commission?
Well, actually, before we get to a motion, I'll just say real quickly, I appreciate that you brought up the issue. And since we had a discussion of it before, just want to make sure that we got clarity, sufficient clarity on what is or isn't said, because I think where we came down about the restrictions on deliveries is that according to the operations plan, they are limiting themselves to a once per week direct to consumer deliveries, correct? But as stated elsewhere in the operations plan, they also do have, and have continued in the past, I guess, but they're continuing to have the ability on other days to do retail events and other things of that nature. Is that correct? Okay.
And I believe also that the public can come to their farm. Is that part of that? No. No, it's non-retail storefront, correct? Yes.
Great. Okay. I did want to mention that the micro business and all of its components are what the special permit's for. The use of the road is what the conditional use permit's for. I just
Yes.
wanted to make that clear because that had not been mentioned.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. Well, I may have stopped you from when you were just about to make a motion before, so sorry about that.
So now I'll continue, and I'd like to make a motion to recommend that that we adopt Resolution 221589, which does the following: finds the Planning Commission has considered the addendum to the environmental impact report for the commercial cannabis land use ordinance that was prepared for the Salmon Creek Farms LLC project, and finds that the proposed project complies with the general plan and zoning ordinance, and approves the conditional use permit and special permit subject to recommended conditions of approval.
Okay, we have a motion
Second.
and second. Any further discussion before we put that to a vote? Okay, seeing none, then Tripp, could we get a roll call, please?
Mike Newman,
Yes.
Melanie McCaver,
Yes.
Brian Mitchell,
Yes.
Peggy O'Neill,
Yes.
Noah Levy,
Yes.
Thomas Mulder,
Yes.
and Alan Bongio.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Well, the only items remaining are a couple of things under report from planner, but it is 7 o'clock. And should we just go through it? Anybody needing a break now, or should we just go straight through? No? Okay, then why don't we just go right into that last item, which is item H, report from planner, and there's a couple of items under that. The first one is HA, presentation on the referral process and decision on approving authority. No worries.
November 3rd meeting, it was requested to bring back a discussion that started really with the referral process, and then moved into agencies, and then it moved into really talking about what the entire planning process was, because it's like a big black box. And so what I hope to do tonight, and I may not be able to do, but I'm going to give it my best shot, is to demystify the big black box of the planning process. So And along the way, I'm going to specifically answer some of the questions that were asked related to where do the tribes get involved and how do they get involved, and how is their input considered, and that will be specifically answered. We'll also specifically answer how decisions are made to send projects to decision-making, which decision maker, whether it's administrative, a special permit, or a conditional use permit, coastal development permit. So just a little bit of an overview. The application process really starts when an application comes in at the counter. One of the things that we have changed recently is that we really focus on making sure applications that come in over the counter are complete. And the reason we do that is because what we're trying to do is take an application directly in over the counter and put it right into referral. Years ago, they would come in and they could sit for an extraordinarily long period of time before they got put into referral. And so we're really trying to get to a point where if you touch something, you move it into the next stage of the process, and that it's not going, sitting, being picked up, looked at, sitting, being picked up, sitting. It's really getting touched and moved, touched and moved. So right now, it's working better. We're getting complete applications. And typically, it's about 3 days to get them into referral. Right now, we still have either a senior planner or a supervising planner looking at the applications before they're actually put into referral. But that is a substantial improvement. So one of the things the applications have when they come in is they have a check made out to the tribe that has ancestral territory of the region in which the project site is located. And so when we send a referral, we send the referral information with, it's either a $30 or a $35 check to the tribe. And so that's part of the complete application. So then we bring it in and we refer it out to agencies. And the agencies are internal agencies within the county. Department of Environmental Health certainly is a really important one. State agencies, California Department of Fish and Wildlife is an important one. Regional Water Quality Control Board's important. The tribes are important. There's a whole litany, a list of agencies that we can refer to. Depending on the circumstance, we're trying to get better about making sure we hit the community service districts. If it's in a community service district, being sure we're talking to the school districts, particularly for cannabis. And I'm being fairly generic right now. This is both for cannabis and current planning applications. So the zoning ordinance allows for a period of 15 days for the referral period. It's 15 working days. So that's essentially 3 weeks. What we want to try to get to, and this may be for Peggy's benefit, I told her I get dry sometimes, but we'll try not to get too dry, is that technically under the California Permit Streamlining Act, you've got 30 days to determine an application's complete or incomplete. So ideally what we're able to do with a complete application, getting out referral, getting comments back, is we can get out a letter within 30 days saying either, you've succeeded, you've given us a complete application, and we're ready to keep on moving, or your application's incomplete, we have material that we still need in order to complete the review. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later, but that is the objective at that point. Now, I want to throw, because one of the concerns is noticing provisions. So one of the things that happens during the referral period for cannabis projects that are in community plan areas is that at this point we send out notices to neighbors. And that's a pretty broad mailing. I think it's 1,000 feet around the site. So we send out a pretty big mailing list right at the front when we're just starting to process things, but that's only for cannabis projects within community plan areas. So the next kind of element of it is we get the comments back, and we get feedback from whether it be a tribe, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Department of Environmental Health, whoever it is, and determine whether or not those agencies, departments, and the Planning and Building Department have all the information that we need. And if we do, then we can go ahead. If we don't, we need to inform the applicant that, hey, you know, while you submitted an application that we thought on the surface was complete, there are circumstances here that really need further analysis, and we need more information to understand whether it complies with the code or not. And at that time, we'll also do a preliminary CEQA analysis. And oftentimes, the information that's being asked is whether or not we have enough information to understand the potential environmental effects. So that decision point then is, do we need more information? And if we do, we notify the applicant. We tell the applicant, hey, we've received your application, but we need this additional information before we can move forward. And then really that application goes into a pause at that point. We stop working on it until we get that additional information. And I want to say this is where, when we talk about how long it takes to process an application, if you were to calculate the amount of time that it sits in this, where we've asked for more information, or we're waiting for the information to get back, that's where most of the time is spent, right here. We have another decision at that point, is that, what kind of CEQA document does it require? And I'll talk more about that on the next slide, but if it's not exempt, we're going to then move forward to preparing a CEQA document. And if it's ready to schedule, then we'll move forward with that, and I'll go into more detail about that. But that's the critical decision point coming out of the referral period. Now, I want to say, well, I can address that a little later. So when we send things out to the tribes, this is a map showing all of the ancestral territories within the county. And so you can see, particularly around Humboldt Bay, that there are 3 tribes that overlap there, and there's often multiple tribes that overlap. And so oftentimes we notice all the tribes that have claim to that ancestral territory. And so historically, it has been pretty cohesive in terms of the tribal response, the tribes working together. We typically get consistent responses, or they agree to let one person be the voice, and that's the way it's traditionally worked. There is a situation, there are 2 situations right now where that's not the case. And so we're frankly struggling with that. I'll leave that one alone right there. When we ask for more information, the most common requests have to do with biology, and this often has to do with a comment that came back during the referral period from CDFW, that they believe that there may be some plant species, or there may be something on the site that needs further analysis, and they want that examined. And so we'll ask for some sort of biological report. It may be just the botany. It may have to do with other species. But there's also times where perhaps for whatever reason we didn't get a archaeological report with the original application, or perhaps after the TIPO, the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, has reviewed the report, they found that it wasn't adequate for whatever reason, and they need more information. That's also true of the biological reports. Oftentimes we'll take in a biological report, and CDFW will say, ooh, this really misses the mark, and you guys got to go back and do some more work. One of the great things that delays right now is the geologic analysis for wells associated with cannabis. Right now, the one engineering geologist that's preparing those reports is booked for the next 4 months, and frankly has kind of said, I've had enough. I can't take this anymore, and I'm not taking new clients. And so we've got a bunch of cannabis applicants that are kind of in a pattern where, frankly, they're having trouble deciding what to do. Oftentimes, we'll get comments back that there needs to be further analysis on an alternative wastewater treatment area, or the plans are just incorrect. And as I mentioned before, when we're in these situations, this results in a letter and the processing of the application stops. So when it comes to CEQA, there's a series of basic environmental determinations that can be made. I'm not trying to teach a class on CEQA here, so I won't go into the depth of what all the variations of these are, but basically a project can be found exempt, and that typically comes in two forms. It's either statutorily exempt, meaning that the state has determined that even if there is an environmental effect, don't care, we're exempting it because we want those kinds of projects to move forward, or it's categorically exempt, and those are types of projects that have been determined to have a less than significant impact, and so no further CEQA analysis is necessary. So if it's exempt, there's no further action that's needed. The only thing that we're going to do beyond that is just prepare a notice of exemption at the end of the project to say, yep, the Planning Commission determined that it was exempt, and so it's done. There are situations where there may be some things where there could be impacts, and so we've studied it. We've looked at the biology, we've looked at the cultural, we've looked at the geology, and found that it's not going to slip and slide, and so things look okay. And so a negative declaration is prepared and circulated, and I'll talk a little bit about the process of that a little bit later. Or it may be that, wow, there's some potential impacts here, but if we do certain things, they can be mitigated. And so mitigation measures are incorporated into the initial study, and then something called a mitigated negative declaration is prepared. The difference between a negative declaration and a mitigated negative declaration is that a negative declaration is just that not all less than significant impacts. Mitigated negative declaration means there's mitigation measures tucked in there someplace, and you probably want to read through that and find the mitigation measures. And then if there's significant impacts or there's reason to be concerned about a project, then an EIR is prepared. And then one of the things that the Planning Commission sees quite a lot is a situation where a previous environmental document adequately addresses the current project being considered, in which case we rely on that prior document. In those cases, we prepare an addendum to the environmental document. And all that does is says this project fits within that analysis, and here's the only difference. And so we do that a lot with cannabis projects. So in starting to prepare an environmental document through the process, I just wanted to talk a little bit about consultation, because it's really, really important to understand that a lot of people feel like we just come out of the blue with things. Nobody's had a chance to give input on these processes, and I just want to say that's not true. So early consultation really starts during the referral process. And during that process, agencies, tribes, everybody gets that referral. They get to look at the project. And then oftentimes what we do is that we will be talking with an agency to find out, okay, what are your concerns? What do you want to see? What's the result of this that you're looking for? So that we then start to develop an understanding of what the target document needs to do. And CDFW is an important partner in doing that, and that's predominantly because they're both a trustee. In fact, they're the only trustee and responsible agency. A trustee agency is an agency that's given responsibility over a resource. So CDFW has a responsibility to look out for the resource, but they're also a responsible agency in that they issue permits. So they use our environmental documents to issue permits based upon what the lead agency, the county, does. The water board is an important part of that discussion. Tribes are an important part of that discussion. And the tribes really do get involved an awful lot. And I really want to slow down here for a minute because I know that this was kind of what prompted this discussion. And, you know, we have obviously, when we're going through this process, referred this to the tribes. So during the referral process. But then there's really 3 different ways that tribes have further involvement. And one of those is through the cannabis ordinance. And this is going to get really convoluted, so if you have questions, raise your hand. I don't mind being interrupted and talking about it because it's important that you understand this. And that is that the cannabis ordinance identifies that TCR's tribal cultural resources, sorry, I'll try not to speak in alphabet soup, but tribal cultural resources are protected. And that development from cannabis-related development needs to stay 600 feet away from a tribal cultural resource, unless the tribe grants permission to be closer than 600 feet. Cannabis is the only development type in Humboldt County that's subject to those regulations. So that's different from everything else. What all other projects that prepare an environmental document, negative declaration, mitigated negative declaration, EIR, are subject to is something called AB 52 consultation. AB 52 consultation is a consultation about tribal cultural resources. Now, tribal cultural resources in the AB 52 context is not necessarily archaeological resources. It's something that is of ongoing cultural importance to the well-being of a tribe. And it can be a lot of different things. And so what the state did is identified that, you know, an archaeologist isn't going to understand or know what's important to a tribe. An archaeologist can go out and find what's under the ground. But in terms of a culturally significant place, understanding, archaeologist isn't going to get there. The only way to get that information is for the local government, the lead agency, to have a direct government-to-government consultation in confidence that's completely protected and that is confidential with the tribe. And so what we're required to do is that when we're preparing an environmental document, we send out a letter to the tribes which have an ancestral territory covering the project site and offer to engage in government-to-government consultation about tribal cultural resources. That is a completely protected discussion that hopefully to allow the tribe to give a greater understanding of why things are important and to be able to speak freely and to be able to identify what can be shared and what can't be shared. And those are very valuable meetings. I will tell you this, that when you're able to sit down with the tribe and hear their heart, that is a completely different scenario than talking about, you know, things that you might find in the ground. So it's important to differentiate between tribal cultural resources in the cannabis ordinance and tribal cultural resources under AB 52. Because one of the things that that CEQA allows a local government to do under AB 52 consultation is to identify it as a significant adverse impact. I don't even like to say that, but the CEQA gives us permission to even say, okay, we understand this is important to the tribe, but this is so important to the overall development of the county that we're going to do this anyway. And I don't want to raise any red flags, but one of the things that the EIR for the Terrigen project did was just that. it completely identified the significance of the Bear River and Monument. And that was well laid out. So nothing was hidden there. That was all disclosed. And obviously that became a turning point in the discussion of whether or not that project should be approved or not. And I will say that I learned a lot in those discussions for that. And those are important. Those are important discussions. The other one is SB 18, and SB 18 predates AB 52, but SB 18 requires consultation with the tribes anytime the general plan is being changed. And so if you're going to change the land use, if you're going to grant and allocate land use, it's important to find out what's going on the land there. And so that's another consultation requirement. Does that make sense? I'll stop right there and field any questions that you might have.
Nobody else. So I'm the one that brought this up, and I get it with everybody until you get to the tribes. So I'm trying to get a little bit of clarity on how the tribes get to put input, I guess. I was always under the belief that it was whichever tribe had the it's MLD, most lineal descendant, was the one that got to say. So if this is closest to, let's say, I don't know, it's, in Lolita, it would make sense that Table Bluff would be the closest, so they therefore would get it. Or, if it was in Arcata, Blue Lake would be, when we're talking about the 3 Wiyot tribes. But then we've seen in multiple projects that have come before us that you have, it seems like one tribe may get asked and they're not the closest, or it doesn't seem like it. And I've had this question asked by applicants, how is this? I mean, I've got one person who's contacted me and said that I got a letter from one of the Wiyot tribes saying it was go ahead and wanted to continue with the project, and the planner said, well, we've got to talk to the Wiyot tribe. He goes, I did. I've got a letter right here. I mean, I've got it on my phone. I can show it to you. And he says, well, no, the planner said we've got to talk to the Wiyot tribe. And he goes, what do you mean, the Wiyot tribe? And he says, well, we got to talk to the Wiyot tribe. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm even asking the question, what do you mean by the Wiyot tribe? They're all 3 Wiyot tribes. Well, the Wiyot tribe, I guess, I always thought it was Table Bluff, but I guess they've renamed themselves as the Wiyot tribe. So the question is do they have preferential authority over things, or is it that they all have equal authority? It seems very gray as to project how that goes.
So I'm familiar with the circumstances you're speaking to, and
it's more than one project, but
well, it's the only one that I'm aware of. Because there is a sharp contrast in recommendations and desires from the tribes, that is actually currently scheduled to go before the Board of Supervisors on December 13th to interpret the provision of the cannabis ordinance, which identifies that there is a 600-foot setback from a TCR. And when you've got 2 tribes that have ancestral territory covering that site, and the 2 tribes disagree, how do we apply that provision of that ordinance? It's never happened before. I've never seen really the tribes disagree before 2 very recent projects. And so it's a new thing. I hope it doesn't continue. But we've been fortunate, I guess, until very recently that, the tribes have been very collaborative and given us kind of one voice. Now that there may be more than one voice, and they may contradict each other, we're going to have to do some work to figure out how then do we resolve that. And in this context, it's a little bit difficult, frankly. If just, and I will say under pure AB 52, it would be a little bit easier to resolve. But because the cannabis ordinance is so stark and so cut and dried, that, you know, where there is a tribal council that says, no, that to us is a TCR. It's hard to overlook that. And it's hard for staff to overlook the governing body of a tribe saying, you know, that's significant to us.
Well, I'll ask a question too, because I didn't want to hold us up, but since we're kind of on this point, I wanted to be clear about, I understand you said that both the cannabis provision, the cannabis ordinance, and AB 52 refer to tribal cultural resource. But are you saying that that same phrase legally has a different meaning or somewhat different meaning in our ordinance than it has been interpreted to have under AB 52?
Absolutely.
Okay, can you just clarify that point again?
Yeah, so under the cannabis ordinance, a TCR they have very similar definitions between the cannabis ordinance and what's in CEQA, which makes it a little bit more confusing. But under the cannabis ordinance, if it's determined to be a TCR under that definition, and one of those is just the tribal council has said, we consider this to be a significant resource, a tribal cultural resource to us, that allows it to be a tribal cultural resource. And we don't want to allow any development within 600 feet. The cannabis ordinance basically is that, okay, you can't be within 600 feet. And under AB 52, they could say, that's really significant to us. But CEQA allows the local agency to identify that as a significant adverse impact, and then make findings of overriding consideration, and then to approve a project anyway.
Got it. So, but just as a follow-up on the question I asked, so I understand that under CEQA, that tribal cultural resource, that finding of or determination of that being a a culturally significant tribal cultural resource can be overruled in the same way that other significant impacts can essentially be overruled if they're itemized, if they're expressly discussed. But and we can't do that in the cannabis ordinance. We're more cut and dry about we have to get their permission or we abide by the terms of the ordinance. But in terms of what constitutes a tribal cultural resource, are both similarly broad in the sense that they're not just archaeological, they're anything that the tribe itself says is a cultural resource?
Yes.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
And you've got Peggy's hands up.
Thank you for pointing that out. Yes, Commissioner O'Neill.
So I'm not going to give you a big, long history lesson on our local tribes, but maybe that's something that someone would want to learn on the side. But there is a lot of overlap between these tribes. When you say tribe, this whole problem or situation was created by the federal government, you know, that there was termination of these people, there was taking away all of their lands. The Homeless Indian Act provided these small rancheria parcels to put people on because people were homeless. That happened around the turn of the century, but you have people that have overlapping familial ties. All tribes in this area were not like, you know, the Navajo tribe or something. They were villages and they had family ties. And so the federal government's the one that's come in and created these divisions. But that doesn't mean that you can't be a member of the Wiyot tribe. And I was there when we changed the name to the Wiyot tribe. We just made that decision because that group at Table Bluff opened their enrollment and allowed anyone that had ancestral Wiyot blood to become a member of that tribe. And so you have people from Mad River, Bear River, they could be a member of the tribe at Table Bluff. Whereas other groups may have been, less inclusive and said, no, we're only going to, limit it to the few families that were terminated and then unterminated. So there's a long history, and it's not like, okay, this is the Sioux tribe and there's one tribe and one tribal chief. There's people that have ties all throughout, the ancestral territory. And so you're just going to have to live with that. It's not going to be what you necessarily want it to be, but it's been created by outsiders and the federal government. And so that's the way it is now. And so you could be a member of the Blue Lake Rancheria, but your people are buried on, the bay, so there's a lot of overlap, and, and you mentioned that in your map, and you're just going to have to live with it. I think you're not going to be able to turn this into something that you want it to be because it fits, the circumstances as you want it to fit. It's going to be messy sometimes, and sometimes it's not. A lot of times tribes don't respond at all, and, they're fine. I mean, they have other issues that they're dealing, and this can't be a priority because it can't be on top of everything all the time. There's a lot more going on with them and their daily activities, and there may be only one person that they have that can deal with all of these issues. So, if anyone I worked at Table Bluff a long time ago. I actually started their first role, and I have a lot of information. They have a lot of information themselves that they could share with you, and they're probably the people you should be talking to and getting those answers from.
Okay, Commissioner Bongio?
I think what Peggy just said kind of explains what the question I'm having. I'm just going to give you a scenario, Director. You put a project out there. Let's say it isn't cannabis. It's a real world project out there. And two of the tribes comment back, but they have differing views on what should be done in whatever the circumstances are on this project. What do you do then?
That's actually a little bit easier than a cannabis situation, because what you basically need to do is evaluate what the impact to the resource is. And then the real question is that how is that protected? I mean, when you're doing CEQA impact determination, the first course of action always, the preferred course of action is protection. So if you can protect the resource, you protect the resource. If you can't, for whatever reason, then you explore ways to mitigate the impact to the resource. When it comes to cultural resources, one of the difficulties is once you touch it, you're affecting it. And so there are two basic ways to avoid: stay away from it physically, or to cap it. And in my experience, most of the tribes work really well together in terms of identifying what they think is appropriate. There always are exceptions to that, and sometimes things defy logic in terms of why some recommendations get made. I'm not here to answer. I can't answer those questions because I can't know what people are thinking. But I've just not ran into a lot of situations where it's not possible to really work together with the tribes to come up with a solution that everybody can find acceptable or tolerable. We may be running into a couple right now where I'll be proved wrong. I hope not, but I don't know. It really requires people working together. And I think from the local government standpoint, the most important thing that we can do and this is where I want to be really careful, and I hope, Peggy, in your comments that you didn't take offense to anything I've said, because I've tried to be careful, is that we seek to understand first. I mean, that's one of the great, I think, failures that we commit a lot of times in terms of coordination, is that we don't seek to understand. And so from a tribal relationship standpoint, seeking to understand is the starting point, the middle point, the end point, in terms of developing a strategy.
I see Commissioner O'Neill has her hand up. Is that up from before, or did you raise it again, Peggy?
I thought I lowered it. It looks like it's lowered, but I'll take it down. No, okay, got it.
Got it. Thank you. Now it's down. Okay. Well, we interrupted you with a couple of questions. Was there more, though, in the presentation?
I have more.
Yeah. Okay, if there's no further questions, then let's give it back to Director Ford to continue.
So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about public review, because public notice and public review were part of the question that was asked. And one of the significant avenues for people to get involved with the public review is through the CEQA process. When a decision is made to prepare an environmental document, either a negative declaration, mitigated negative declaration, or EIR, there is public review. Excuse me. So with a negative declaration, it's really important to understand that there is a 30-day public review period, that we send a negative declaration out for public review. It gets posted at the state clearinghouse. It gets posted at the clerk recorder's office. We notify people that it's available, and it's available on the county website. And we send notices to people who have expressed an interest in receiving those notices or in that project. We send it to public agencies directly. And then we also notify property owners and, I believe, residents within 500 feet of the project site. And during that 30-day period, we receive comments.
Just want to double check on what you're saying, because I'm just seeing property owners, but you also added in residents.
Yes.
Within 500 feet. So it's both then.
Yep. Yep.
Not just the property owner, it's also the residents within 500 feet.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So we receive comments. Comments obviously come in towards the end of that or after that 30-day public comment period. Now, negative declarations are a little bit different than EIRs. In fact, they're a lot different from the perspective of it's not a requirement to respond to those comments in the document. But what we do, if you'll look in the resolution, is that we identify what the comments are topically, and we respond to the comments as part of findings and evidence within the resolution. So we do make sure that we review the comments, we listen to the comments, we attempt to understand the comments, and then make sure the comment doesn't raise something that we haven't thought about. So what we do is then we explain that, nope, we have thought about it, here's the answer to it. So when you get into an EIR process, the process is a little bit more expanded. And the first step is to prepare a notice of preparation. And basically that goes out to agencies, can go out to interested parties, it can go out to the public. Says, hey, we're in the process of preparing this EIR. Here are the things that we think are important that need to be analyzed in the EIR. What do you think about that? Do you think that there's other things that need to be discussed? What are your ideas? And so after that, then we begin preparation of the draft EIR. And then the draft EIR is now circulated for 45 days. CEQA reform from last year modified the public review period from a period between 45 and 60 days to just 45 days. And so it's down to 45 days. That's what we would do now. And then we send out the same noticing that we would do for the negative declaration when we send the draft EIR out for public comment. We receive the comments, and then as part of that, we prepare responses to those comments. Those responses or changes in the document based upon those comments are then encapsulated in what's called the final EIR. The final EIR then needs to be provided by law, by statute, to responsible trustee agencies at least 10 days before the hearing, but we make it available to the public, to anybody that provided comments. We let people know, hey, here's the final EIR, you're free to review it. So I want to say that's just a really important part of a public review process, and it does give the public the opportunity to get engaged. Then we're moving into the types of permits, and the first type of permit and the most simple permit is a zoning clearance certificate. This is something that the Planning Commission will never see unless it's associated with a different kind of permit that does come to the Planning Commission. A zoning clearance certificate is basically a building permit. It's an entitlement. It's a ministerial permit that basically says what you've proposed to do complies with the zoning ordinance. Go ahead and do what you said you're going to do, because what you said you're going to do is in compliance. One of the things that has gotten a little bit murky with zoning clearance certificates is that there are provisions in the cannabis ordinance that certain types of cannabis permits can be approved through a zoning clearance certificate. And so these zoning clearance certificates go through the same process that a special permit does, that a CUP does, except that when it comes time for action, they just get signed by the director, actually. And then we have special permits, and those actually are permits that normally, under normal circumstances, we send out a notice saying, hey, we received this application. We found that it complies with the ordinance, and we're intending to approve it unless you want to have a public hearing. And that's called a notice of intent to approve, a NOIDA. And so that's what normal projects are subject to. In the case of cannabis, because of some of the pushback with respect to cannabis applications, we schedule all special permits for a public hearing. We were originally doing that at the zoning administrator, and then it became kind of, how should I put it? There was some pushback about larger cultivation sites being approved by the zoning administrator, when, keep in mind, the ordinance actually allows an administrative approval. So many of those that are an acre or larger now come to the Planning Commission. And so we're far more conservative with how those are addressed than what the ordinance calls for. Mm-hmm. The next is a conditional use permit, and those can be approved by either the zoning administrator or the Planning Commission. Same with the coastal development permit. Coastal development permits, under some circumstances, can be approved by the director. Same with variances, tentative maps all come to the Planning Commission. So how are those, how do we decide where the approving authority should be? This is a direct copy. I'm sorry, this is a horrible image, but it comes right out of the zoning ordinance. And this is the table that just identifies when and where things can be approved. The W there really identifies that a public hearing can be waived. The O's identify who can be the authorized hearing officer. And then beyond that, what we tend to do is that try to anticipate, is this going to raise issues that really require a public airing, a public hearing and that it's best done with the Planning Commission. So if there are things that are broaching on policy issues, if there are things that are controversial because the neighborhood is opposed, if there are things that, you know, just because of past experience, i.e., cannabis projects that are an acre in size. That's how the decisions are made to send things to the planning commission as opposed to the zoning administrator. So then when it comes time to schedule an item for action, we notice property owners and residents within 500 feet. We notice anybody who's expressed an interest in the project. It's posted in the paper, and the ordinance requires that it be posted at least 10 working days prior to a public hearing. So in order for it to appear 10 working days in the paper and to get sent out 10 working days before the hearing, we're really working on a lead time of, 3 weeks to 4 weeks to be making a decision. We try to do it at week 5 before a hearing, to be making a decision of what's going to go to hearing that week and what's not. And unfortunately, what's often happening during that period of time as we're moving into the hearing process is we've told applicants, if you get us all the stuff that we need, and if you fix this and tweak that, we can just write a really simple staff report and say, everybody loves this and we're good. So there's a lot of changes going on right at the very end. So it gets, frankly, a little bit complicated. But that's that final 5 weeks coming into the hearing.
Director,
Yep.
Commissioner Mulder has a question.
Just to clarify, this is my understanding. I just wanted to actually just more for the public. The way I understand it is interested person. So if someone contacts the planning department and says, I'm interested in project X, please notify me of any time it's coming up for hearing or new information, they would be included in the notice list. Is that correct or incorrect?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And that's really the end of what I had to present. I hope that answered the questions that were asked.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner McCaver.
Yeah, thank you, Director Ford. That was really great. And I just wanted to add something for the public, too, that all of the documentation that you were referring to there in the beginning can be found by the public on the Humboldt Acela. So
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that because it's really useful. You can see all of the documents as they go through their little checkpoints that you were outlining earlier.
Yeah.
So, that's it. Thanks.
If I could, just to expand on that a little bit, thank you for bringing that up. Excella Citizens Access is available on the Planning and Building Department website. Excella Citizens Access. So, yeah, Excella, ACCELA. And you can get your own login. You can log in as a guest, but you can go in, and so if it's your application, if it's an application in your neighborhood, you can go in and see what the stage is. You can find out who the planner is. You can look at, as Commissioner McAvoy mentioned, you can see the technical documentation, the plans that have been submitted. That's all right there, and that's available for the public to see. And that's when things are coming up for hearing. But that's also if you're looking and you are concerned of things going on and you hear about something on a certain site, you can search by address and you can pull that up and find that information.
Great point to bring that up. And just to further educate us and the public, if we're not using Excella, how do we access that system? How do we find it, from the... Is it linked to the Maine County website? I mean, the planning department's website?
Yeah, go to the Planning and Building Department website, and you should be able to, trying to get back to our main page.
Right. You could even show us on your screen exactly where to do that. Perfect.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, let's see. Trip, yeah, I'm going to share a screen again. So if you just get the Humboldt County even AC, you get it right there.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's our website's page that takes you there and gives you a guide for how to.
Okay.
Well, if you scroll down, this is actually pretty helpful here.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this will guide you, give you instructions, basics, quick search reference, how to use it, how to create an account, creating an account. So there are helps there.
If you go to the page above that, online permit management, you can get to there from permit tab at the top and then online permit management, but you have it right there in your path.
Oh, did I?
Yes, that gives you the link straight to.
So here you can search. If you've created your own username, you can log in here. No, you can do it as a guest. So you can also, environmental health, their wastewater treatment well applications are also on Excella. Building permits are on Excella. So there's a lot here.
Once you go to, you can, if you scroll up and go, let's say even address search, once you get to a project, you can go in and ask, click on more details. You can see, every type of document, every stage of the planning process from every agency. And that's very early on before any notices ever go out to, any of the usual noticed agencies or people or commissions.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah, no, it's really great to shine a light on this resource because I didn't know about it for a long time either. And I would sort of wait till things basically got to a hearing to be able to see all the documents. But in fact, lots of stuff is there well ahead of that time. Thank you so much. I got a lot out of that presentation. Anybody else have questions for the director about any of this stuff?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. Thanks. Commissioner Mitchell, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, I've noticed that a trend that more and more we seem to have, a large number of the items that are on the consent agenda asking to be continued. And I'm just wondering if there's a straightforward reason as to why that's occurring, what the state of the industry, people are abandoning their permits right at the finish line, or is it them promising to have the certain reports to us by the day of the hearing and they don't get them, or why is that happening?
Director, if you'd like to respond.
I'd be happy to discuss that. Perhaps we could finish this item first.
Sure. The public comments, yeah. We have another comment on the public, 7454. Mr. Sawatsky, go ahead. You are free to comment.
Oh, thank you for my opportunity to speak. I did want to say you all benefited from Feliz Navidad, or Merry Christmas gift to John Ford, and his zoning administrator meeting only took 3 minutes today. And this bulk of this meeting only took 1 hour, and that's because of John's good karma. But I do appreciate his very great report on this thing. It's so important. And, you know, as you even saw there, it's difficult for staff to actually access the documents. And I always appreciate people like Melanie McCaver and some of the other people who have the ability to go on those things and review those things for us, because this is just about impossible for the public to manipulate. And I've had before, trying to address these things, access problems. I've had staff, you know, their top planners sometimes take 2 of them for 30 minutes to access something they say should be easy. So it's difficult to access. But I do want to thank you for the presentation. It's imperative that we have the knowledge that has just been imported to us. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that comment. I'm not seeing any other comments from the public, so I will go ahead and close public comment on this item. I opened it and now I'll close it. Bring it back to the commission. If I don't see any there, the Director, Commissioner Mitchell asked a question. Did you want to respond to that question?
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Chair. Is that this meeting was a bit of an outlier, is that we had a little bit of a mix-up with Zoom links on the legal notices, and so that would have deprived people from being able to meaningfully participate in the meeting, and we couldn't take a chance on that, so we needed to continue them, and those items were ready to go. I mean, that was just one of those things that happens sometimes. You hate mistakes, you hate misfires, but they happen. We are working on moving, we call it moving things to the left, which means we're trying to make decisions earlier and earlier and earlier to make sure that things are truly ready to go, because we don't want to schedule items and then have them continued. We did get an email this week from an applicant that wanted a continuance. They're noticed, the staff report's written. It's like, I shouldn't say this, but I wrote a email back to the planner and asked them, do they know that they're kicking into their own goal? I mean, you know, they're at the finish line right now. I'm, you know, why wouldn't you want to go across the finish line? And I think they actually stayed on the agenda today. But there are times when things change at the last minute. There are times when an applicant sees the staff report and it's like, ooh, I need to think about that. And so they ask for it to be continued. There are things that sometimes we catch them, like one of the items that we saw today, Rodney caught, and we wish we would have caught it sooner, but it didn't have a special permit for less being within 600 feet of the National Forest. And, you know, we try to avoid those misfires, but sometimes they happen. I apologize for it. We're trying to not have that happen. Today looked really bad, though.
Well, stuff happens. I think I would just say that, like that last one that you just referenced that Rodney caught, probably would have been good to say up front what the reason was for asking for us to continue that one, just because then it would have put it out there to the applicant, and they obviously didn't know since it happened at the last minute, but they called in and they got the answer. So I think as long as we explain what happened and what led to having to continue stuff, that's the best we can do. Okay. Well, if there's nothing, oh yeah, Commissioner Mulder, sure.
I just want to thank the director, definitely educational and helpful, understanding the process. And also want to thank Peggy on explaining the tribal renaming part, and there was a couple other notes I had in here, so I want to thank her for that as well.
Yeah, agreed. Really educational from both fronts. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else on this item, on this presentation, there is one more report from the planning director that we're going to get to now, which is item B, Planning Commission procedures. This is basically following up on the discussion we had a couple of meetings ago about the Planning Commission procedures that were drafted in response to the supervisor's directive, and this is our chance to formally forward a letter pertaining to that to the supervisors. So I'll let you speak to this point, Director Ford.
Thank you, Chair. And I struggled with whether or not to give you the whole document back and try to redline it or just do a letter. And then I realized I didn't have it in Word, so I couldn't give you a document to redline. So I apologize for that. So I just went ahead and wrote a draft letter with major changes that I thought the commission had captured. And if I didn't capture them all, I apologize and will happily add to this and fix it. But the first one that I captured, at least in my notes, is reconsideration. And after doing some research by the county counsel's office, normally reconsideration is done on the same day. But then it does need to be re-agendized and re-noticed before action is taken. And the reason for that is that it could be that the Planning Commission decides to reconsider an item after an applicant has already left the room. And so it really requires that be re-noticed, re-agendized, and the applicant be given the opportunity to be present.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the change on page 7. The change on page 8 is the commission correctly pointed out. It's a majority of a 4-person quorum, 3 votes for a 4-person quorum, so that everybody's clear that you need to have 4 for a quorum, and a majority of that is 3. Funny how math works. And then the next one identified, and this was a bit of a discussion, and Council Duke spent some time providing some guidance on this, and the way this is presented is the way the law reads. It was written a little bit different than the law previously. The way the law reads is general plan amendment requires a majority of the full commission must vote. The way it was written before is that that would include zoning ordinance amendments also. So we clarified that it was general plan amendments, and then for other legislative actions, a majority of those present can approve an item.
Okay. Can I actually ask, I do have a question about this particular point, and I know we're going to also take public comment on it, but can I actually ask that you put the letter up on your screen?
Sure.
Just so, because for that last one, there's I'd really like to look at the particular wording of how it's phrased. I had a note in my printed copy of this, like a question mark in the margin from our last discussion. So here we can see the red line, which is actually helpful to see what you cut and then what you added to the end. I understand, although we didn't discuss it last time, that there's a difference between general plan amendments and other types of legislative actions. So it's only for the general plan amendments that a majority of the full commission must vote on the matter. But this is worded to say, for general plan amendments, a majority of the full commission must vote for the proposal prior to the Board of Supervisors holding a final hearing on the proposal. I think this might have been a point that Commissioner Mitchell brought up last time, or somebody did, it was Commissioner McIver, brought up that this is worded to suggest that we have to have that majority vote for it, but I think we need to say vote on it, correct? I mean,
I believe that's true.
Yeah, I brought that up last time, and the director said that he was going to adjust it.
Yeah, no, I apologize for that. That is a very good point.
so we would have to have 4 of us in the vote, but it could be 3 votes for and 1 vote against, right? Or even, we could even have a majority of us voting against. I mean, I'm
No, in
guessing,
this particular case, you would need 4 votes in favor of whatever action you're taking.
4 votes in favor of whatever is action. Okay, a majority of the
So
full.
you could recommend the board not approve something
Mm-hmm.
with a vote of, say, 4-3 or 4-1,
Mm-hmm.
and that would qualify.
Okay.
And I think the 4 probably needs to be, I think the 4 is changing or is affecting our understanding of what it says. It probably should be on.
It should maybe say on a motion, rather than for a proposal, because for a proposal makes it sound as if
We're
it
giving it the
is
thumbs up.
encouraging us
Right.
to indeed vote for it.
Yeah.
Whereas, we may be, voting against it. So if it was clarified, I think proposal is the word that's kind of misleading there.
Commissioner Mulder.
I read it differently because I view it as the proposal could be to deny the amendment going forward. So I look at it differently. I hear what you're saying as far as the wording, but whatever we vote on, we have to vote for the proposal. I don't know. I'm good either way, though.
Commissioner Newman.
Well, instead of the word for, F-O-R, not F-O-U-R.
Right.
F-O-R, just for the public out there. Maybe put the word on, just on, instead of must vote on the proposal prior.
That was what I suggested last
Yeah,
time.
I think that would be the way it should be on there.
But
as
perhaps
opposed to
on a
for.
motion would be, I think, more clear.
Motion versus proposal.
Commissioner Mulder.
It would have to be, I mean, if you're going to go motion in favor of the motion, it would have to say because it has to be majority in favor. That's just.
Okay. Well, majority of the full commission, so with this small change, it would read, a majority of the full commission must vote on the proposal prior to the Board of Supervisors holding a final hearing. And that, in that sense, the proposal is whatever's said about it in favor or against it. So, are we good?
I agree. That's what I had
Yeah,
requested
that was the
last time.
original request. Okay. Commissioner Mulder.
Don't usually wordsmith and go English major stuff, but the way it reads is must vote on the proposal. So I mean, one could argue that they read that as 4 people vote on the proposal, 3 of them in favor, 1 against. But I'm fine to vote on it the way it is as well.
That is how I read it. But, okay, but just to be clear, I mean, this is actually what I'm really trying to nail in on because I wasn't 100% clear myself. Because, yeah, for other legislative actions, a majority of those present, just so in contrast to the end of this, for other legislative actions, a majority of those present, let's say you have 4 present, 3 would be sufficient to pass the legislative action. For this one, it needs to have a vote to approve it, that is at least 4 members of the commission to pass a motion. Must vote to pass a motion on the proposal. Okay, a majority of the full commission must vote to pass a motion on the proposal. Okay, everybody good with that? That seems okay to me. Yep. You can't have enough wordsmithing with things like this.
We could be here until 10, Thomas.
Okay, we can have some further discussion about this, but before we get into that, since that brings us to the end of what is in this draft letter, substantively. So I want to open public comment, and we do have one hand up in the public, public 7454. You are recognized for comment on this item.
Thank you. I usually just look over to county council on those kind of wordsmithing things and go to that. The other thing is, we did have an example of reconsideration. I think that was one of the terms I heard earlier. There was a similar term to that. And that's earlier when certain commissioners were not aware of certain testimony or certain documents that were put in, and they made an informed decision or not fully informed decision. And that wouldn't happen necessarily during the same meeting. So I don't know how that would work where, if it was pretty well acknowledged that full consideration wasn't done with full documentation being provided. So how does that work? Is that something that's being addressed here, or am I off point? So that's my question. Reconsideration.
Director, would you like to respond to that?
Sure, I can respond to that. So that was a discussion, and what we found in the research was that reconsideration is done at the same meeting, not at a subsequent meeting, particularly since, like, for the meeting of November 17th, we are now outside even the appeal period. That approval now is valid because it hasn't been appealed.
Got it.
So to say that you could reconsider something at any time would create.
Right. No, it's a reasonable yeah. So I'm going to close public comment. Thank you for that question. It is relevant to understanding how this provision could work. So just how it would work would be, we have a discussion, we make an action, we vote on an item, we say vote to deny it or continue it or something like that. But then within that same meeting, further information comes to our attention. We could sort of undo the action that we just took, but not take any other action at the time. We would basically decide to undo the action that we took earlier in the meeting, renotice it for consideration at another meeting in light of whatever has come to light.
Correct.
Okay. Commissioner Mulder.
Actually, it's not an agenda.
Nope, nothing.
I'm not going to step outside the agenda. I really want to, but I'm not.
Well, I mean, I think the main thing then, so we've had a discussion of what is in this letter. I wanted to ask the commissioners, other commissioners, if there's anything else that you're thinking of now, or that we discussed last time that might not be reflected in this, or any other ideas that you've had since then that we might want to suggest edits to the procedures document. And if not, is everybody good with approving this letter? So I think that'll require a motion then. I've
So
got no-
moved.
Okay, moved that we approve this letter for sending to the supervisors.
With the edits done today.
Yes, thank you. We have a motion to approve this letter with the edits discussed today and send it on to the supervisors. And a second?
I'll second it.
Oh, actually, Commissioner Newman already seconded it, but thanks, Commissioner O'Neill. Maybe that didn't carry through. You did, right? Yeah. Okay, any further discussion? If not, could we have a vote on this item?
Mike Newman,
Yes.
Brian Mitchell,
Yes.
Melanie McCaver,
Yes.
Noah Levy,
Yes?
Peggy O'Neill,
Yes.
Alan Bongio,
Abstain.
and Thomas Mulder.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries with 6 in favor, 1 abstention, and no opposed. All right, and then that does bring us to the last item before we adjourn, which is Planning Commission discussion items. Commissioner Mulder.
Where I can tiptoe on a limb and stay within the Brown Act. It was just brought up that maybe there wasn't attachments to previous projects that have been before us, and my memory served that there was. So I just sat here and looked at Legistar and just attachment 6. Agency and public comments for CEQA circulation period and 10-day period. So it's there. So it was all there. So I know that I read what I needed to read.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, because I may have been forgetting it when I spoke, when I may have not recognized, may have not acknowledged that I had seen those comments before the last meeting, but I think I did see them as well. Commissioner Bongio.
Yeah, thank you. I've been waiting for a few weeks to hear somebody would bring this up, but since nobody has, I wanted to, it was a pretty big deal, I think, that our own Melanie McCaver got awarded the Planning Commissioner of the Year for all counties at the, I don't know what the acronym, but the County Planning Commissioners Association back in Pleasanton. I think it was in November, so congratulations. I think that's saying something when Humboldt County gets acknowledged over most of the big counties, so good job.
Yeah, that's,
Thank you very much.
yeah, thanks, Commissioner Bongio. That was at the CCPCA Humboldt, the California County Planning Commissioners Association meeting in Pleasanton, which is a body that Melanie and I have both served on, and we organized their, which a number of you attended the conference that they put on in Eureka last year. But that was a real special honor, and I'm glad that you brought that to light, that Melanie was acknowledged that way.
Yes, Noah can attest to me being genuinely surprised.
Okay, well, any other items for discussion? If not, then I will adjourn this meeting and see you all next on December 15th.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.